Hi, I'm Charlie, and welcome to the Language Attic, where we teach you about all things English. Now, this week I'm going to be talking about the Winter Olympics and some other sporting events more generally. As you probably know, the Winter Olympics ended at the weekend, and it's been on for a while, and this is the first time in a few years that I've kind of properly watched it. I feel like, in general, I don't watch the Winter Olympics as much as the Summer Olympics because the sports are kind of difficult to understand sometimes compared to the Summer Olympics. Like, I've been watching the curling a lot because it's been on TV a lot for some reason. I don't really know why, but I was watching the curling. And it took me a while to figure out how it works 'cause I didn't quite understand it. And that's quite a simple sport compared to a lot of the other ones. Like, I don't know, some of like the snowboarding things and the skiing. I have absolutely zero clue how good someone's doing or how they decide the points. And so, yeah, I just have never really watched it as much because I don't really know what's going on. Um, Whereas in the Summer Olympics, I feel like a lot of the sports are very common sense. They're very easy to understand. Like, who runs the fastest, who jumps the highest, it's things like that that are very easy to understand for someone who doesn't do sports. Whereas the Winter Olympics, a bit more complicated in my opinion. Um, that being said, I have watched the Winter Olympics a bit more this year, um, mainly because I have more free time, to be fair. But also, I've just kind of gained more interest in some of the sports, I guess you could say. I did notice that the curling was on a lot, and I've never watched curling, never in my life. Like I said, I never really understood how it worked in the first place, so I had to Google it. Um, but it was on TV a lot because there were a lot of different rounds. A lot of the sports, it's just kind of one day or one competition or maybe two where everyone competes, everyone does the same thing, and whoever does the best wins. Whereas in the curling, it was a round robin system, which means that all of the teams play each other, and then whoever did the best throughout all those games, those people then continue on to the finals or the semi-finals, where it's like a knockout system where whoever wins, they win, and the other person gets knocked out. So there has been a lot of curling on TV in the UK. I don't really know why. Um, but there was a British team in it, and they were actually, I think, the favourites to win. So maybe that's why. I didn't know that the UK was good at curling, to be honest with you. I've never met anyone who does curling, but I think all of the team was Scottish, so maybe it's more popular in Scotland. But it was very interesting, nevertheless, to find out that we have a curling team that's good at curling. Um, and so I caught bits and pieces of it. I didn't really understand who was winning or what was happening, but I saw bits and pieces. And then I found out that we were able to go on to the semi-finals, and I thought, oh, okay, we're doing all right then. So at that point, I started to pay a bit more attention to it, and we ended up winning the semi-finals, which a lot of people didn't expect because we didn't do super well in the round robin stage. And from what I understand, we beat a team who did a lot better than us. So that was quite exciting. Um, and then I did watch the final live. I did put it on. It was on a Saturday night, and I was like, well, we're moving on to the finals, and I feel like I've seen so many of these matches now. I've kind of got to know the team members a little bit. I start recognizing them, and I kind of feel, I don't know, a bit attached now, so I need to watch the final. And we didn't end up winning, which is a shame, but we were playing against Canada, and if you have been paying any attention to the Winter Olympics, you might know that the Canadian curling team is in somewhat of a sticky situation right now. They had a bit of controversy because I believe when they were playing their match against Sweden, there was a bit of an incident, I guess you could say, where the Swedish one of the Swedish team members called them out for doing something that was against the rules, and the Canadian team member really like vehemently was like, "No, I did not do that. You're lying." And he was swearing on TV, and he was like, "I didn't do that," and he got really angry. And then the Swedish guy was like, "Okay, I'll send you a video later." And he was like, "Yeah, do it. There's no video because I didn't do it." And as it turns out, the Swedish news outlet was filming that entire thing, and so there is in fact video evidence of it. So that was quite funny. Considering curling is not really a popular sport with the general public, I guess you could say. Like, I've never known anyone to be a fan of curling or really pay attention to it. Um, and that kind of whole incident really brought attention to the sport. I guess you could argue in a bad way, but I think also in a good way because no one was paying attention to it before anyway. So this fun little controversy actually might benefit things in the long run, maybe. And I know the British team in particular have got a lot of support from people who didn't really watch curling before. So that's been interesting. I again don't really know much about curling, but I will say it's very funny that the Swedish guy so strongly argued that he didn't do something that he definitely did. That being said, from what I understand, it's not really like cheating as such. It's not like maybe he was doing it on purpose, maybe he wasn't. I don't know. I don't really know how much that would benefit him to do that in the first place. So maybe it was just a mistake. But I do find it funny that he said he didn't do it and he did. So yeah, a lot of people have very strong opinions on the Canadian curling team, which I can guarantee you has probably never happened before. So yeah, it's always interesting when there are new eyes on a sport, because there's a lot of sports, especially in the Winter Olympics, where all the fans of that sport are either people who do that sport themselves, or they're people who used to do that sport, or they're people who are really, really, really um, into that sport for some reason. So it's always interesting, I think, for those fans when something happens and a load of just kind of regular non-sporty people start paying attention to that sport, because it can kind of shift opinions, and you'll see a lot of uninformed opinions, I guess you could say, of people who don't really know what they're talking about but have very strong opinions anyway. So I can imagine that's quite interesting. Um, that being said, congrats to the British curling team because we did get a silver medal. And as I only recently found out, Britain isn't really that good at the Winter Olympics. I don't know why I thought we were better, but we usually do all right in the Summer Olympics. And so I guess I just kind of assumed that we were also pretty all right in the Winter Olympics, but apparently we're not. I guess um, this year we matched our record of the amount of medals we won, which I think was like 5 or something. That's not a lot at all. Like, we were pretty low down in the rankings, which, yeah, it kind of surprised me. I mean, I know we're not exactly a country that has a lot of snow. We don't really have like mountains that you can ski down or ski resorts or anything like that. So I guess it kind of makes sense that there would be less winter sports here. Um, but that being said, I don't know. It just kind of surprised me because there were also some countries that did quite well that I didn't necessarily expect. But I guess the thing is, those countries are very big, or those countries have mountains, have snow, those kind of things. So yeah, it's just an interesting one when you think about it. I was also quite impressed that Japan did so well. I know that Japan does have mountains and they do have a lot of ski resorts. But I guess I never really thought about it when I lived there. So it was just kind of interesting to see how good the Japanese were at some of the sports. And America as well. I know America has ski resorts, especially in like Colorado and those kind of places. But yeah, it's just interesting seeing which countries are good at which sports, because sometimes it's not exactly what you expect. So moving on to another sport that I did watch the figure skating. Um, I didn't watch the men's figure skating live, but I did kind of keep up with it and what was going on with it in the lead up, because a lot of people were talking about it, and it did kind of spread to wider social media a little bit, and so I kind of knew what was going on beforehand, although I didn't watch it live. But after the fact, I did catch up. I did watch a lot of videos and see what was going on. Um, but yeah, I fun fact. So a few years ago, I was kind of into ice skating a little bit. Not myself because I am not very good at sports. I went figure skating one time, and it was not great. I'll put it that way. I was like 14. I did fall over a few times. Um, and in general, I wouldn't call it a fun experience. It was yeah, quite precarious. But nevertheless, I did have kind of a phase where I was interesting in like the men's figure skating world, mainly because of Yuzuru Hanyu. If you don't know who Yuzuru Hanyu is, he is like one of the most popular men's figure skaters. I definitely in recent years. I'm not really into figure skating, so I don't know how in the long term how famous he is, but I know for a fact in the past like 10 years or so he's been very popular. He's a Japanese figure skater, and yeah, just very very successful, very good skater. And I think he retired from professional skating recently-ish, like a few years ago, which is a shame. But nevertheless, I when he was still kind of active, I guess, I was interested in him. I'd like heard about him, and I wanted to find out a little bit more about how skating worked, so I could understand what was happening when I was watching it. So I did watch, a few videos about how skating works, about the jumps and things like that. That being said, I forgot all of it, and I do not ask me to identify any of what they're doing because it made perfect sense when I watched the video, where this person explained how each jump is different from the others. It made a lot of sense when I watched it in slow motion, but when you watch it in regular speed, it is just impossible to tell what is going on in my opinion. So I just kind of gave up on that. But yeah, I kind of was vaguely interested in skating, I guess you could say. So I knew a few of the skaters, but I think most of the ones I knew have already retired now. So the people going into this Olympics, I did not know who any of them were, apart from Ilya Malinin, because, like I say, social media had kind of hyped him up, and I'd seen his name mentioned a few times. I believe he was the only one I'd heard of beforehand. Maybe Yuma Kageyama as well. But yeah, in general, like I say, I'm not massively into skating, so I didn't really know many of them. Um, but then again, on the day, obviously things did not pan out how people expected, and so that was interesting to see. And I watched a lot of videos about that to kind of find out what was going on. And as you may or may not know, Ilya Malinin was the favorite to win the gold medal, but that didn't happen. He made some mistakes that people didn't really expect. And then the person who did end up winning was actually from Kazakhstan, and his name is Mikhail Shaidarov. And I did watch a video of his performance, and I do think it was really good. It was really impressive. It was very clean. It was just nice to watch, I guess you could say. And I also really, really, really appreciate his choice of music, because I do find that a lot of the time, especially in the free skate, because in the figure skating, there's two different times that you skate. One of them is a bit shorter, and one of them is a bit longer. The free skate, which is the longer one, for some reason in my mind I thought that would be the one with more interesting music because it's longer. I don't know. But in general I find that a lot of the time the music is not very interesting. um that being said, Mikhail Shaidarov chose a really, really cool song, in my opinion, mainly because it is by Dimash. If you don't know Dimash, check him out. Oh my god, go on YouTube, search Dimash. He is a Kazakh singer, and he is insane. I remember when I was in school studying Russian, one of my teachers showed us a video of Dimash, and we were all just completely shocked because this guy can sing. He has pipes. So yeah, very very impressive singer, really really cool. Just really, I didn't realize when I was watching the video at first that it was him because I was so focused on the skating. But I heard those high notes and I was like, wait a minute, this sounds a bit familiar. And it was indeed the Mash. So yeah, shout out to the Mash, love him. But yeah, his skate was really good, really impressive, and I really enjoy the fact, or I guess appreciate the fact that he won in spite of absolutely zero expectations for some reason from other people. I guess in a sense it can be very helpful when no one expects you to win because there's less pressure. Whereas if everyone expects you to do really well, suddenly there is a lot of pressure because you need to do well. So I guess that could work in his favor, perhaps. But apart from that, it was interesting in hindsight to see how some of the commentators talked about his performance because a lot of them were kind of downplaying it and saying like, oh, good performance. He won't win, but maybe next year. And it's interesting how kind of internal bias works because you kind of expect these sports commentator people to be somewhat unbiased when they're talking about sports, especially with skating to some extent, because there are certain components that are objective and there are certain components that are more subjective. But at least in terms of the jumps, they're very objective for the most part. So you'd imagine that people couldn't really argue against that, I guess you could say. But it did seem like certain people just had no expectations that he would win or get that many points, which definitely interesting. Um, but yeah, he did really well. So congrats to Mihail Shaidarov. It is the first time that Kazakhstan has won a gold medal in the men's skating, to my knowledge, which is really nice, really impressive. Kazakhstan has a kind of interesting history with skating, which I won't go into because I'm not super knowledgeable on it. But they did have a really, really good skater like a few years ago, and things ended really tragically for him. So in my mind, it was really heartwarming seeing all the comments from Kazakh people online, um, who loved this previous skater and are now really proud to see that there's another skater who's actually won them a gold medal. So I feel like that's one of the really nice parts about the Olympics is seeing people who didn't really expect to win. I think it's just really nice to see. And it brings kind of new viewers to the sport and new funding to sports, especially maybe in countries where they need it. So it's really nice to see things like that. And in terms of the other skaters as well, the two Japanese skaters ended up in second and third, which was also really nice to see. Um, I forget the guy's name. I think it was Yuma Kageyama who was in second. But I think it was the guy who ended up in third. You could tell he was really not expecting it, and his reaction was also really really cute. He was like completely shocked. And yeah, that's another thing I've learned throughout this whole thing is that Japan is actually really good at figure skating. I mean, I kind of somewhat knew that because I knew Kaori Sakamoto was good, but I don't know. I just didn't realize the extent of it. Like the Japanese figure skaters are really good, so that was new information for me. So of course, after this whole thing happened, I was like, okay, well, I already planned on watching the women's skating anyway because there's a lot that happens in it in my in my opinion, so I wanted to watch it anyway. But especially after all the drama and all the shock that happened in the men's skating, I was like, okay, I need to watch the women's skating now. And so again, there was a lot of kind of media hype around the American team, which yeah, this seems to be a common occurrence where obviously Ilya Malinin he represented America, and there was a lot of talk about him online, and it was the same with the women from the American team as well. Um, Media play is a very interesting thing, but yeah, so I kind of knew some of the competitors going into it. Like I say, I knew Kaori Sakamoto because she was in previous Olympics as well, and I just heard her name. And I sort of knew about the neutral athlete. I forget her name. And like I said, I knew about the American girls. And so going into it, I wasn't really sure who would win because, like I say, I'm not really a professional when it comes to skating or anything like that. I can just assume that if they fall over, they're gonna lose points. That's about all I know. But I did watch it, and it was it was very interesting to watch. It was very dramatic because one of the favorites for the gold medal was Amber Glenn, and she ended up making a mistake in her first skate, which really, really impacted her score. And it was a real shame, and it was really sad to see that it really upset her. But then in the free skate, she did incredibly well. She flawless, more or less, performance, and she ended up coming back and getting fifth, which is so impressive considering she was in 14th before that. So that was really nice to see. A lot of people were really big fans of Amber Glenn, so that was really interesting. And then the other American girls, there was one who finished about mid table or a bit lower, I think. And then the other kind of one of the, I guess, standout people online of the Olympics, you could say, was Alyssa Liu. She had retired from skating in her teenage years, which is a really young age to be retiring from anything. I wasn't, I didn't even do anything at that age, but she had decided that she had had enough of the pressure and she wanted to retire. And then she decided a few years later that actually, no, I'm going to come back, but this time I'm going to decide everything. I'm not going to let anyone else tell me what I should be doing. I'm going to dress how I want. I'm going to train how I want, etc. Um, and so she came back. Again, she has a really nice mindset that I think we can all take a lot of inspiration from. Her mindset was just, look, I'm not here to win. I'm just here to skate the way I want to skate, put on a good show, and just feel happy. And I think that's a great mentality, especially in sports, because a lot of sports and a lot of athletes, the things are not super healthy sometimes. So it's really nice to see a healthy mentality like that. And she did really well. I remember watching her short skate and just feeling really calm. Because I don't know, when you watch skaters a lot of the time, you kind of feel this tension because you're nervous for them. Like you're like, oh my god, if they fall over, like oh my god, like I don't know. I just feel like secondhand nervousness for them. But with Alyssa, I didn't feel that. Like watching her performance, at no point did I think that she was gonna miss a jump or fall over. Like everything just seemed really calm, really steady, and that was really nice to watch. And that energy, I felt that energy, and I was like, wow, that was really cool. And then going into the free skate, once again, I had that same feeling of like calm, of composure, and she did amazingly, and she won the gold medal, which I think is amazing. Like I say, someone who has such a healthy mindset winning the gold medal is really good for the sport, I think, because in previous years I once again, like I say, I did briefly get into skating at one point, and also partially apart from the other skater who I mentioned before, part of the reason for that was because at the last Winter Olympics there was a lot of controversy and a lot of drama regarding the Russian team, which I won't go into it in full because it's an entire thing. But if you go on YouTube and look it up or go on Google, you can find a lot of information about the how the Russian Skating Federation operates. Let's just say it's not super good. But for the past few years, all of the Russian skaters were just doing, at least in the women's sport, all of the women skating in Russia, they were doing these moves that no one else could do, and they were just doing these insane things and like winning. It was kind of almost just expected that they would win. And last time things went very, very wrong, which again I won't get into, but if you look it up, you'll see that there was kind of an incident, and then there were three Russian skaters, and the girl who was expected to win did not win. The second girl who was expected to win also did not win, and it ended up being the third girl who no one really expected much of who won. And because of that, there was a lot of tears, there was a lot of shouting, there was a lot of just eyes on the Russian coaches because again, that coach in particular not very good. Um, and so because of that, I kind of knew what the atmosphere was, I guess, going into this games. And obviously this year there are no Russian skaters. There's one or two like neutral athletes who are from Russia but compete not for their country. And so there were a lot of opinions about that online from a political standpoint, obviously. So I didn't really know what to expect on that side. But this is the first time in a while that someone with a healthy way of living has won, I guess you could say. Um, which again I think is a really, really good thing. I think it's a really good poster for the sport, and I think it just people who are in the figure skating world, especially young people who have seen these Russian athletes always win through completely destroying their bodies. It's really good for them to see someone who's quite normal, who's quite has a good mindset, a good way of living, an interesting, slightly different person, I guess you could say, who doesn't fit the stereotypes. It's really good to see someone like that win. So congrats to Alyssa Liu. And one of the other skaters I mentioned, Kari Sakamoto, it's her last Olympics actually because she's retiring soon, as far as I understand. She won bronze at the last Olympics, I believe, and obviously this time she really wanted a gold medal because it was her last Olympics. And unfortunately, she ended up missing just one jump, and so she ended up in silver medal position, which is really, really unfortunate. I mean, getting a silver medal is still an incredible thing. Getting an Olympic medal in anything is something that not many people can say they've done. So congrats to her anyway, because getting a silver medal is incredible. But I can understand that if it's your last Olympics, you really want to go for gold. So it's really unfortunate that she just came short. And in third place, we had another Japanese skater, just like in the men's. So actually, in third place was a much newer skater, a very young skater, who really didn't expect to get a medal at all. She did really, really, really well in the short skate. She ended up first after that. But then she didn't do so well in the free skate, and so she just kind of assumed that she wasn't going to get a medal. And then when she realized that she got the bronze, she was so shocked and so happy. And it was just really, really nice to see that. And Alyssa went and celebrated with her as well. And I think one of the things that was really nice this Olympics compared to the previous ones was to see how the women supported each other and how they hyped each other up and how they just kind of felt joy together, rather than there being arguments and, all these things. It just seemed like everyone was really happy for each other. And so it was just a very nice thing to see. So as for the Winter Olympics, those were kind of the only two sports I properly watched. I saw bits and pieces of like some of the ski jumping things. I don't really know what they're called. Some of the really extreme, crazy sports where they like go down a ramp and do backflips and things like that. But yeah, mainly those are the only two ones I watched. When it comes to the Summer Olympics, I'm looking forward to actually. That is the one I usually watch more of. And I think the Summer Olympics, especially in the UK, is a bit more popular perhaps, mainly because we had the Summer Olympics in the UK in 2012. And so whenever I think of the Summer Olympics, I think of London 2012, which was such an interesting and I don't know, it was a very specific, interesting era to be in as a young person in England, I guess you could say, because I was still in primary school at that point. I would have been like 10. And we had a lot of, I mean, obviously in primary school, it's not super serious in terms of the work you do anyway. It's more so just like somewhat fun things. And I remember we did so many Olympics themed things. Like we wrote like little essays about who our most inspirational athlete was. We made like posters and things like that. And so I just remember that time really vividly because I was like 10. Um, and it was just a really nice time to be English, I guess you could say. I feel like things have just gone downhill since then. But it was, yeah, it was a really interesting, nice time. And we were actually pretty decent as well at that Olympics. I can remember certain athletes like Mo Farah, who I believe did the long distance running, Jessica Ennis, who I can't remember exactly what she did, but maybe it was like the pentathlon or something. A lot of like just general like running type things. And Tom Daly as well. Like there was a lot of athletes who became household names after that Olympics. And it was yeah, it was just a really nice time and we were pretty successful. And I feel like maybe in the wake of that, the Summer Olympics continues to be fairly popular in England compared to the winter one. And speaking of sporting events, one of the sporting events that I do kind of focus more on is the football side of things, obviously. Um, if you have seen our YouTube channel, you will know that I recently did a football related video. So please do go watch that if you're interested. But obviously, the World Cup is a huge thing. And is it this year, the World Cup? I think it is in America, which, oh, that's a decision. Um, but nevertheless, I'm looking forward to it. The last World Cup was interesting. I don't exactly remember play by play what happened, but I definitely remember what England was doing and how we were doing, which was not amazing. I just looked it up to kind of remind myself what happened, but yeah, we ended up going out in the quarterfinals, which is a shame. But there's this interesting phenomenon, I guess you could say, where it seems like every World Cup or every Euros, it seems like England has a really strong team and everyone's really feeling good about our chances of doing well. And then things just fall apart. Like, I don't really remember the World Cup that much, apart from Argentina winning. That I do remember, because we lost to France, and then France ended up in the final with Argentina, and then Argentina ended up winning. So that I do remember. What I also do remember is the World Cup song and the whole opening ceremony because Jungkook of BTS sang the World Cup song, which was quite possibly the craziest crossover I have ever witnessed. I remember asking my dad to put the opening ceremony on so I could watch Jungkook perform, which, yeah, crazy, crazy crossover. But yeah, one thing I do remember more than the World Cup is the Euros, which, if you're not from Europe, you might not really know as much about. Like, the World Cup definitely seems like the biggest thing in football, and on a worldwide scale, it for sure is. Um, but the Euros is definitely also very big in Europe, and especially in the UK. Um, and the Euros happens also every 4 years, I believe. But it's kind of 2 years after the World Cup, and so every 2 years we have either the Euros or the World Cup. So there's a big football competition every 2 years, if you live in Europe, that is. And so, yeah, the Euros is also very important here. And I definitely remember the most recent Euros very well, because I was in Japan actually at that time, which was kind of a shame because I couldn't really watch things live, due to the time difference and just due to not being able to access the TV channels and things like that in the UK. But at the same time, it was kind of nice, I guess you could say, because I'm not really the kind of person who feels like homesick or like wants to go home really when I'm abroad. Like, if I'm enjoying myself, I don't feel like I don't miss home very much, I guess you could say. But when the World Cup was on, it was like the first time that I've ever kind of felt like, oh man, I actually am missing out on something here, which is not really a common thing that I feel. Because, you know, as much as England has a lot going on, when I go abroad, I always have a great time, feel like wherever I am is probably more interesting than where I live in the UK. And so I don't necessarily ever feel like I'm missing out on something by not being in the UK. But at that point, it kind of made me feel a little bit more patriotic, I guess you could say. I lived with a lot of other Europeans. I don't really know if they were quite as much into football as I was, but I definitely like chatted about it with a few people. Also, Eurovision was on at that time, but we've already talked about that in a different podcast, so let's move on. Um, but yeah, the Euros was on, and so it was a really interesting time for me in particular because I was keeping up with it, but due to the timing of things, I had to keep up with it in a very unique way. And so what I would do was I would go to sleep. The match would happen while I was asleep, and then in the morning when I was walking to university, I would listen to. There's a YouTuber called Mark Goldbridge. He's a Manchester United fan mainly, and he does a lot of videos about that. But he also talks about English football in a wider sense, and he always like makes reaction videos and like live streams and things like that. And so in the morning when I was walking to university, I would listen to his like post match reaction, on the game, and he would talk about, if we played well, which we didn't most of the time from what I can tell. He would talk about what happened, the goals, the tactics, blah blah blah. And so I never really watched the matches. I would watch like compilations of the goals afterwards, but I never got to watch the matches live. And so I would just have to rely on this YouTuber's kind of summaries of things when I was on the way to university to find out what was going on. And so it was kind of nice, I guess, in a way. It was just a very specific, unique experience, I think. Um, from what I gather, we didn't play very well, but we ended up getting quite lucky. And even though we were a good team, we just didn't play very well. But that being said, we did win all of our matches, so clearly we were doing something right. We were getting a bit lucky, maybe. There was one match that I did actually listen to live because my friend and I were doing a trip, from Osaka to Hiroshima. We got a night bus, and the match was on at like 1 a.m., I think. And we were on this night bus. I couldn't sleep anyway, because I just can't really sleep in public transport. Um, and so I was like, you know what, I'll just put the match on like the radio and I'll listen to that and I'll try and go to sleep. And so I did catch that match, at least the commentary of it. And we won, which was nice. And yeah, we ended up getting to the finals of that Euros, which I can only imagine what the feeling was in England at that time because we do not have a great history with just competitions in general. Like we get very unlucky a lot of the time, and yeah, I mean you've heard the song "It's Coming Home." Like they even say in that song, which this song was made like 20 years ago or something, more than that at this point. In that song, they kind of say that it's been 30 years since we've won anything. That is still true. We still have not won anything since that song was made in the 1990s. So England doesn't have the best history with competitions with football. And so, I'm sure everyone was really excited and also really nervous, and as was I. I actually looked up if anywhere in Osaka was showing the match at like a sports bar so I could go and watch it. But I didn't end up doing that because I didn't really have any friends who I could go and watch the match with, and I didn't really want to be at a random bar at 4 a.m. on my own. So I didn't end up doing that, which I think was a good thing because we lost. And if I went all the way to a sports bar at 4 a.m. and we lost, I think the shame, I just couldn't handle it. I did stay up to watch the match at home. Well, I say at home, at my dorm though. I found like a stream and I watched it, and the pain. I've still not recovered from losing that. But that is the feeling of sports. You win some, you lose some. Sometimes you have these crazy, outrageous things that happen that everyone's so excited about. Other times you lose and it's completely unexpected. But that's just the way things work. That's just the competition. Um, but yeah, I did quite enjoy watching the Olympics this year, and I'm really looking forward to the World Cup. So if any of you guys watch the Olympics or plan on watching the World Cup, do let us know in the comments who you're rooting for, who you want to win, who you're not rooting for, or I don't know what you expect to happen, who you expect to win. Just let us know. And once again, thank you for listening. This is the first time I've done a solo podcast, so I hope it's okay. I hope I wasn't yapping too fast, and I hope you understood everything. But that being said, once again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next time. Bye bye.